But again, it is my pleasure to introduce all of you to Hortencia Pina. And Hortencia and I have been colleagues for many, many years, 25, maybe even 30. We were trying to
Ay,
remember.
ni lo menciones.
Yeah, I know. We before we used the bottle, before we used the
Yeah,
bottle. But
exactly.
we met each other in 1995 because Hortensia was part of one of the most amazing schools in the country at that time, and that was the Alicia Chacon Multilingual School in El Paso, Texas. And we helped support the we gave that program technical support. And we, by meaning ATDLE, at the time we were called Two-Way Cabe, we gave them the technical support to get it started. And what a place it was. I always tell everyone that multilingualism is alive and well. Just Google Alicia Chacon Multilingual School, because at that school, they were running a program that was called an 80-10-10. 80% in Spanish, 10% in English, and 10% in a third language. And I'm going to let Hortensia describe that model for you. But at the time, it was revolutionary. And we were so excited to be part of that effort because it was something that we fought very hard to have our biliteracy programs. And here comes this little school that just organized in such a way that says two ain't enough, right? We're going into three, and the beauty of that concept and what they did. So years later, Thinking Maps was really, really wise, and they picked her up as one of the trainers. And you've been working for them for how many years?
13 years now.
13 years.
13.
So, but a longtime educator, dual language educator from El Paso. Les presento Hortencia Peña. It's all yours.
Gracias. And thank you so much. Muy buenos días a todos. Thank you for joining us. As Rosa was sharing with you, we go back a long ways, and definitely Rosa shared, joined us and providing more than just technical support, but that emotional support, the training that she provided for us. I mean, we were starting something that was very unique. We had no models to go by. Uh, and it was funny because even our students would say, we're kind of like the guinea pigs, right? Because nobody else is doing this. And so they knew it from the get-go that, we were learning, but
Yeah.
the parents had confidence in us because we kept them informed of what we were doing. But it was an amazing, amazing time that I had the privilege and honor to be part of. And that really, really changed my life. Not only as a teacher, but as a parent, because then I realized, I'm like, this is what I want for my students. And so I worked there at Alicia Chacon for a couple of years. And then from there, just to tell you a little bit more about me, I moved, I started to grow, became an administrator. Then I went to central office, because then eventually our whole district became a dual language district. From the start of this tiny little school that was really situated in a part of town that our superintendent said, we don't want it on the north side of the freeway, because that was the affluent piece of El Paso. Because I want it on the south side. I want all our kids to be able to have access to that. So that was like such a big influence and stuff. And so from that little school, we began the district-wide dual language. So
The
one of
first, the first in the country, right, Hortensia? You were the
yes,
first in the country.
the first whole district dual language that we went district wide. And so then I moved to central office, and I became the dual language coordinator for all 62 campuses, which was really, really cool to be able to do, and be able to say I had a little part in what happened. So I became dual language coordinator. Then my last job with the district was as director of bilingual education. But as you see in my map, in things that have influenced me as a person, I have dual language teacher. Even though I work for Thinking Maps, I'm always talking about dual language because that was such a big influence. And I just saw the students just grow and blossom so much that to me, that this is the way to go. This has to be the way to go. So as I mentioned before, as a parent, that influenced me. Both my daughters went through the dual language program. And so one of the other things that happened out of this tiny little campus is that we became a dual language school district, meaning we had dual language pre-K through high school, which I think Rosa will agree with me that getting it to the high school is a very difficult task for a lot of school districts. And we were able to accomplish that. So both my daughters, Ana Elisa and Leah Rebecca, graduated with dual language honors. So they had dual language from pre-K all the way through high school. So both my daughters are fluent in English and Spanish, and their third language is Russian. So like we said, it was multilingual, not just two languages, but it was multilingual. My oldest daughter is now working on her PhD in biology, so we will have a doctor in the house. And Leah Rebecca, my youngest daughter, is an RN. Again, the language piece of it as a nurse has opened so many doors for her. So she is on the front line right now working with COVID patients. So I ask you for prayers, but going through that dual language program and truly being able to say that my daughters in my family are the only two that can actually sit down and have a conversation with their grandparents in Spanish, because I wanted my daughters to have that heritage language. And now I tell them, when you all have children, you have to make sure that they keep that heritage language, that they keep their Spanish as we move forward. So dual language is in my blood. It's not going to go anywhere. Like I said, I work for Thinking Maps full time, but dual language is still something that I often talk about. And the power of the maps to be using them when we're teaching language. So that's a little bit about me. That's my email address. I will put it up again towards the end of our session in case you have any questions or you want any other additional information. That is a way to be able to get a hold of me. If you would like to see anything else that I share that you would like to have. So getting started with our session is going to focus mainly on how to use the maps to help students with text structures, because that is going to be your basis for your speaking, your listening, your reading, and your writing. And so it is important to be able to have students be able to identify and use those text structures. Right now, we are in a time where, we used to say one of the descriptors for English learners was that we had students at times that had interrupted formal schooling. Well, guess what? All our students now have interrupted formal schooling. We're going to have to, when we come back, we're going to have a lot of catch up to do for all our students. As a matter of fact, yesterday I was watching CNN, and John Keane was talking about the fact that those students that are experiencing the bigger gaps and the lack of equity are our English learners and our African American children. They are the ones that are having these bigger gaps because of lack of technology, lack of language. Parents right now are in survival mode. They are not having the opportunities and the time to be able to work with their students. So one of the things that we need to do is let's focus on the thinking. Let's focus on those skills that they can use independently, because right now they are having to do a lot of things independently. And if we can give them those tools to be able to use, then they can take care of the facts. I always say in my trainings that back when I started teaching, back in 1984, which is a long time ago, some of you probably weren't even born, I used to have all the facts. because there was no Google. Now I don't have to teach them about the Civil War. They can Google that. But I have to teach them about how do I make sense of that information? How do I take that information, and what information do I take? How do I think about it? That's the important thing right now. So here's our agenda for today. We're going to talk about thinking maps and the importance of thinking maps to help students with those text structures. We're going to be looking at expository text and the tools to be using those text structures in English and Spanish. Two of the things that you're going to be receiving that I have submitted for you all to have as handouts are these two that I think are going to help you a lot. The first one is in English. It's the text structure along with the map and the signal words that students have to use, and then the same one in Spanish. So you're going to have it in English and Spanish to be able to use with your students. So looking at expository text, we're using again another circle map that you saw for defining. If we were to define expository text, okay, expository texts have multiple purposes. They have a lot of uncommon vocabulary. It's that academic vocabulary that our students struggle with that are found in these expository texts. They are long and they have a lot of dense information. Okay, there's so much in there that for our struggling students, our ELs, our struggling readers, expository text is a struggle. So when students are looking at informational text or expository text, they have to actively be able to dissect that text. Okay, they can't be these passive readers. They have to actively be able to dissect this text. They have to engage in vigilant thinking. How do we teach them how to do that? Okay, that's what we're going to be looking at, is how do we get them to actively be thinking, which is all about that metacognition, thinking about their thinking, okay? And be able to, as they're reading, determine that explicit meaning of the text, making those logical inferences. And we need to be able to be doing that as we move, as they're moving through that text. So it is a lot of information and a lot of things that have to happen up here for them to be able to understand that text. So when we talk about text structure is understanding how the author put this piece of writing together. Okay, it would be nice if we had the author there and say, so what are you trying to tell us? How are you trying to organize this? Okay, but we don't. We have to be able to look at the reading, look at the text, and identify the pattern. What is this author trying to do? Okay, is this author comparing and contrasting? Is this author explaining why? Okay, we have to be able to identify that pattern, because if our students can identify the pattern, that's going to help them with prediction. That's going to help them actively start thinking about that text. So if I start reading a piece of text and it says something like, cats and dogs make fabulous pets, but there are quite a few differences between cats and dogs. Right away, I start thinking, oh, I think I know what this author's going to do. He's going to compare a cat and a dog. And what are the differences of the cat, between a cat and a dog, and making good pets? I already am starting to make predictions because I am focusing on how is this author organizing the information. It moves me from a passive consumer of text to an active reader. It right away does that. With just a couple of sentences, I move in that direction. So I am not the type of student who will read a piece of text from the top all the way to the bottom. And then you ask them, you say, so what was it about? And they're like, I don't know. Why? Because they're passive consumers. Their goal is to get through the text. They don't know how to stop and think about what it is that they are doing. So being able to identify how an author organizes that information is definitely going to help with predictions and reading comprehension. We talk about the fact that the maps is a scaffold, okay? The maps are going to be able to provide students with a tool to become active readers, okay? So when you look at this visual, we say, you know, that tower is that complex text. The maps that we use along the way are going to help scaffold comprehension and understanding of that. And as a scaffold, we all know once we get it, the map should go away. It is a scaffold. It is not something that is going to stay there forever. It is a scaffold to get them to understand that complex text. So how do we start that? Okay, how do we start working with our students for them to be able to start using these maps on their own? First, we have to establish a common language for learning. When we started at Alicia Chacon, okay, our students were learning in Spanish, English, and then they had a choice of Chinese, German, Russian, or Japanese. We had all these languages, and it was great. But here's the one thing that Thinking Maps did, because I got trained in Thinking Maps when I was still working at Alicia Chacon. And I had students that were learning in English and Spanish, and then I had the students that were also learning Japanese. We had to have something to tie all those languages. So when I went through the training, I'm like, oh my God, this is it. If we can have a common visual language across all languages that we all can use to teach, that is going to make that teaching seamless between the languages. And so Thinking Maps felt right in place at our campus because this was the common visual language that we used. So if I was teaching in English and I was going to describe, my visual looked like this. If my students went to Spanish, iban a describir el autor o el personaje, it looked like this. If they went to Japanese and they were going to describe something in Japanese, guess what? It looked like this. So even if they weren't fluent in the language, they knew what the teacher was doing. So it was to establish a common language, and it was only these 8 that we used. And why 8? Okay, as we go into defining what Thinking Maps are all about, you know, Thinking Maps, it's a visual pattern. As you saw, we use the same visual pattern in all languages. So if I saw it, I knew what we were doing. There's only 8. Why? We only have 8 cognitive skills. That's it. And so the only, and it is something that I'm going to use in all content areas by all students, by all teachers. The only thing that changes between pre-K and high school is not the thinking. Pre-K students are coming in with these 8 cognitive skills. High school students have these 8 cognitive skills. But what's the difference? It's only content. In pre-K, they might be sequencing numbers. In high school, they're sequencing the battles of the Civil War. But it's still sequencing. We're still using those 8 cognitive skills. So we also became the first Thinking Maps school district in the nation, because we wanted to have that continuity across all schools, across all grade levels. We wanted to have that language, and it made a huge difference. And we were able to get to the point where we were using them in combination to get that critical and creative thinking. So it really just fits so well with our dual language program. And Like I said, when you look at the dual language guiding principles, you look at the curriculum, Thinking Map supports every single key point in strand number 2 about curriculum. Okay. Why? Curriculum and standards have 2 components. It has a cognitive task and it has content. The cognitive task is, how do I want kids to think about this? Okay. What do I want them to do with this content? So the cognitive task might be, students are going to compare and contrast a plant cell with an animal cell. What's the cognitive task? Compare and contrast. What's the content? A plant and animal cell. Okay, so thinking maps are going to fit with your curriculum. It fits with your instruction. You're going to be able to use the maps before, during, and after a lesson. Because again, what are we doing? We're teaching thinking, okay? And I especially pulled out key point number D. Key point D under instruction says we need to promote metalinguistic awareness and metacognitive skills. When you're using the maps, you are making thinking visible. Students are understanding the type of thinking that they're doing, okay? Metalinguistic awareness is students being able to reflect upon and manipulate those structural features of spoken language. Wait a minute, but aren't maps just visual? Aren't they writing? No. Thinking maps can also be used for oral language. And I always tell teachers, don't lose that opportunity to be able to teach things orally, okay, and be able to develop that oracy for our students. Remember that reading, when we read, we are unfreezing the author's thinking. The author is thinking in a particular way, just like the example that I shared with you about the cats and dogs. So when we're reading, we're trying to unfreeze the author's thinking. When we're writing, we're freezing our thinking. Everything goes back to thinking. Okay, so again, when we talk about text structures, you know, we look at the fact that every single one of these maps, if reading is unfreezing the author's thinking, then the visuals are still going to match our text structures. So we're really going to look and focus on 2 of them, okay? We're going to be looking at sequencing, which will be the flow map, and we're going to talk about the multi-flow, which is cause and effect. And the reason for sharing those is because multi-flow is the most common. Okay, it is the most common. It's the one that you're going to find a lot more in text structures and in writing, and you'll see some of that as well. So we're going to start off with oral language. Okay, why oral language? We know that the stronger the students are in oral language, the better readers and writers they're going to be. Okay, we have to develop that oral language. We talk about academic conversations, and I love Dr. Jeff Sawyer when he does his trainings on academic conversations, because academic conversations have to be planned. Just telling students, turn around and talk to your partner about what you just learned, is not an academic conversation. If you are truly going to have an academic conversation, you have to plan and you have to think about what you're going to talk about, okay? What we are having right now, and I wish we could talk a little bit more, would be an academic conversation if we were responding with each other. But I have to plan what I'm going to say before I can have that academic conversations. So using this that you're going to be receiving, You have some guiding questions that the author might ask. You have the map that goes with it. But more importantly, you have the signal words that go with each text structure. These are the words that students are going to be using orally when they're reading and when they're writing. Okay, so I gave them to you both for the flow map and the multi-flow, which are the two that we're going to focus on today. So let's look at our first map. So here you have a map on pollution. Okay, and this map might have been created by the teacher as I am teaching. It could have been created by students, but now I want students to speak off the map. Okay, I want to take that opportunity when they are talking. So I might provide them with a word bank of words that they can use in order to form their sentences as they are speaking. So I might say, pollution, littering and oil spills cause pollution. As a result of pollution, we have global warming. We also have respiratory infections. Okay, notice the language that I am using, okay? And I can give them this. So every single time students get their thinking down in a map is an opportunity for them to speak off of the map, okay? The same thing in Spanish. Okay, it's exactly the same thing in Spanish. So I could say, los lemures están en peligro de extinción porque los humanos están destruyendo los bosques. Uno de los resultados de esto es que no se van a mantener los bosques sanos y no se van a mover las semillas. It's the same thing in English as it is in Spanish. So I want to share with you this map that came from, this is a 4-year-old. So one of the schools that I've had the pleasure of working with is a dual language pre-K center. They have 3 and 4-year-olds at this center, and they are a dual language center, and they are also a thinking map center. And one of the things that they ask students to do is to, at times they assign the maps for them to work at home. So as you can see, this map was not constructed by a 4-year-old. Obviously, parents help with it. But one of the things that students have to do is come back and present their information. So I want you to listen to Ashley as she is speaking off of her map. Okay, this is the tree map. A tree map is used for categorizing. So you see her 4 categories, whereas if she was an older student that she was writing, each one of these would become a paragraph. So I want you to listen to Ashlyn and listen to her speaking off the map. Let me just make sure I have, yes, optimized the sound. Okay.
My name is Ashley. Tu animal es. Python. Okay, tell us about pythons. Pythons eat lizards and frogs and rats. And they live in Africa in rainforest. And some kind of pythons don't have one of these. But blue pythons live here and here. And Menolith is green python and Menolith is marala. Verde. Muy bien. And how does it move? Tell us about how it moves. It slithers. It slithers? Like this. What else can it do? It swims. And it can eat deers. And also like this. Wow.
right, so can you
Genius.
hear her language? Look at the vocabulary she was using. Slithers. She went over here, talked about it slithers. It lives in Africa in the rainforest. And you can actually hear when she's pointing to her map as she's speaking from the map. And her speaking off the map is actually organized in a paragraph form because she talked about what they eat. Then she talked about where they lived and then what it is. And then the teacher, she forgot the last one, asked her, so how does it move? But you can see the organization, you can hear the language that she is using. And as a dual language teacher, I was so excited when in the middle, she tries to speak in Spanish. And I'm like, yes. And I loved the way the teacher so gently corrected her because she said her python was morada. And then the teacher just said verde. And then she just repeated it, verde. It is amazing to be able to have the students be able to know the language of the map and be able to speak off of the map. That's the first step, okay? To be able to speak off the map. The next step is having them write sentences from the map. So once they know how to speak off the map, then they can start writing simple sentences. Again, using the same signal words. Okay, using those same signal words to be able to write simple sentences. So here's an example of a flow map where they talked about how to draw a box and a whisker plot. Okay, then they write from it. Okay, so give me a sentence from this. The first step, because it's the sequence, in creating a box and whisker plot is to put my data in order. The three processes, again, if it's a process, it's a sequence. In the middle of the sequence, all require me to find the median. Okay, so you look at it, yeah. So you ask students to write a sentence from it. We always talk about having students write across the curriculum. I tell teachers, if you are using thinking maps across your entire campus, students will be able to write across the curriculum. And at times I hear teachers say, I'm a math teacher, not a writing teacher. And I'm like, don't worry about it. If your students learn how to write from the maps in language arts, they carry that over because you're still using the same visual. They carry that over, so they do something like this in math. All you have to do is say, pull out your math journal. Now tell me how you did this. Give me a couple of sentences from it. And they will be able to write from that map. Okay. Here's one on the California wildfires. Multiflow, cause and effect. Okay. So earlier we spoke from a multiflow. We used the words caused as a result of. Now they use those to write their sentences. Lightning and very dry weather caused the California wildfires. As a result of the wildfires, innocent people were hurt. Okay, moving into simple sentences, which this for your early grades, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, is amazing for them to be able to do. Okay, one of the things that when I work, I loved hearing that Rosa was saying that you did a training for your K2 because they need some specialization in there. When I do my training for K2 and I get to this point, I tell teachers, put these on Post-its so that students are actually manipulating it, bringing it down to create their sentence, then they write their sentences, then they put them back, do another one. Okay, and that's the way students learn to manipulate the language and know how to construct their sentences. And again, in Spanish, it would be the same. Okay, so here is a flow map on Cesar Chavez. Okay, and they write the same thing. Okay, using those signal words. Después de que su familia perdió la granja durante la Gran Depresión, César Chávez se unió a la Marina del Ejército de los Estados Unidos. Okay, they get it from their map. Okay, and the same thing with the multiflow. Okay, los españoles establecieron las misiones en California. Vamos a escribir una oración. Una razón por cual los españoles establecieron las misiones de California era para ampliar el imperio español. Okay. Notice everything is here except for una razón. Okay, and as you saw before, I can give them a word bank. Once they know them, I remove those so that they start learning how to write from that map. Okay, so we've gone from oral to simple sentences. Okay, and then we move into the text structures in reading. And here's what tends to happen is that we want to right away jump into the reading. But notice how I'm gradually moving the students into the reading to identify text structures, okay? So we're gonna look at sequencing in the text structures for reading. So here's my first paragraph, okay? Again, I'm not giving them a whole article or passage. I'm gonna give them a paragraph, okay? So what's my idea of the perfect evening? First, I get into my comfortable clothes. Next, I play games on the computer for about an hour. After that, a nice dinner always helps. Finally, a good movie is always enjoyable. What's the first question I ask my students? Do you see any signal words? Remember, by this time, we've used them to speak. We've used them to write simple sentences. So now I'm like, identify those signal words. Yes, I do see signal words. First, next, after, finally. Very good. So now that you've identified your signal words, what's the text structure that this author is using? Oh, he's sequencing. Very good. He is sequencing. He is telling us a sequence of events. So now if I want students to take notes, okay, I say, okay, this is a great passage. I want you to take notes. The map that they should be using to take notes should be the flow map. Shouldn't be any other map or any other graphic organizer. Why? Because it's the sequence and the notes will fit here, okay, in that sequence. So now I'm still using the signal words. I'm asking them to identify the text structure and I'm asking them to take notes. You know, when we ask students to take notes, a couple of things happen. First of all, if I said to you, to a student, all right, I want you to take notes here. So read this and take down some notes. What's going to happen? They're either going to write everything down or they're going to highlight everything, okay? For a couple of reasons. First of all, if I tell them, right, take notes on what's important, they don't know what's important. Second of all, they're like, well, I don't know if that's important to my teacher or is it just important to me? Well, you know what? Just so that I don't miss it out, I'm just going to highlight everything. But if I ask them to do this, identify your signal words. What's the thought process? What's the text structure? Then they know what map to use to take notes. It helps them pull out what is important, okay, and lets everything else go, okay? So it's going to help your students take notes. Here's the other thing. If I know that this text structure is sequencing, I also can predict the type of questions I'm going to get. I'm going to get questions like, what did this individual do first? What was the last thing this person did? Okay, those are the type of questions I'm going to get. Okay, so let's try one in Spanish. Okay, it works exactly the same way. So let me give you a minute or so to kind of read through this. All right, so in your chat window, I want you to tell me, do you see some signal words? Encontraron algunas palabras claves. Just give it to me, just respond in your chat window. I don't see too many of you responding, y'all. There you go. Thank you, Irma. I appreciate you. Cuando, luego, de hecho. Exactly, okay? So si encuentro esas palabras, cuando, entonces, luego, de hecho, okay? ¿Qué es la estructura de este texto? Otra vez es secuencia, okay? ¿Cuál mapa voy a usar para tomar notas o para ver este texto? Otra vez vas a usar un mapa de flujograma. ¿Por qué? Porque es una secuencia. Okay. And that's all I have students do. Same thing with the cause and effect, multi-flow. Okay. So cause and effect. Here is the first one. Okay. In English, most parts of the world, there are not as many crocodiles as there used to be. Crocodiles are becoming endangered, and crocodiles are necessary for the balance of nature. One cause. Ooh, there's my first one. Cause. Then I see the word reason. I know what the author is going to tell me. The author is going to explain why these crocodiles are becoming extinct. See how I automatically start becoming an active reader. And I start participating in that reading versus just reading it all together. Okay, so this is going to be cause and effect. And if I told the students take notes on what's causing the crocodiles to become endangered, it would be a multi-flow. Okay, again, what type of questions am I possibly going to get? What's one of the main reasons why crocodiles are becoming endangered? If they do become endangered, what are going to be some of those effects? I know what kind of questions I'm going to be getting. Okay, same thing in Spanish. Okay, so this is on Greta Thunberg being named Person of the Year. Okay, si les pregunto, busquen por favor a ver si encuentran las palabras claves que les va a ayudar a encontrar la estructura de este texto. This is what students should be highlighting. Okay. Estas son las palabras claves. Una razón. ¿Por qué? Causa. Okay. Si yo sé que esas son las palabras claves, entonces yo sé que la estructura de este texto es causa y efecto. Okay. Si yo sé que la estructura de este texto es causa y efecto, entonces yo sé el mapa. ¿Por qué? Porque son los mismos que hemos estado usando. Yo sé que el mapa va a ser un mapa de multiflujograma. Okay. Students need to know, be able to identify those words. Okay. So this is that progression that you would take for students to be able to identify text structures in reading. So what's the next step? Okay. Well, then the next step is going to be the writing piece. Okay. But before we go in there, these are all the text structures that there are. We cover them all when we do our path to proficiency training, so teachers understand the maps, understand the signal words. Right now we only did 2. Okay, I'm going to show you another quick video of 2 students actually doing this type of work on their own and doing it virtually. Okay, so one of the things that they are using is the TMLC, which is our online piece of it. But I want you to see the language that and listen to the language that they are using as they're working through this. Okay. Are we not going to work today? Hold on, bear with me for a little bit. There we go.
Okay, we need to find.
Oops, I'm sorry. I moved out of it.
Okay, we need to find some effects. I think in one of the paragraphs, paragraph 3, yeah, it said that different species will go extinct.
Great one.
Also, I think there was a really good one in paragraph 4, but I don't remember. I'll have to look at that. Can't seem to find it. Do you have one?
I think yeah, it's in paragraph 4. I think, oh, I found it. Fewer trees in the world will absorb carbon dioxide.
Oh yeah, that's what it was.
Okay. So as you can see, the students are using the map to be able to respond to the text and be able to gather their notes. So here's one scaffold that this teacher did. This teacher actually told them, just by pre-drawing the map and giving it to them this way, they knew that there were 2 effects that they needed to look at. That in itself is a scaffold. If students are doing great with this and they're on their own, I might not pre-draw the map. They have to draw the map, which makes it a lot more rigorous, because then they have to figure out which ones are how many causes and how many effects that there are going to be. So students are working together in partners, in small groups, to be able to create their maps and answer those questions. Okay, so once they identify it in reading, then we can start working on them with in-text structures in their writing. Remember, we've written simple sentences, but we want to move beyond those simple sentences. So we spoke earlier about the fact that reading is unfreezing the author's thinking and writing is freezing your thinking, okay? When we look at the path to proficiency training, one of the things that we do cover in a lot of detail is the 6-step writing process. And the most important steps, okay, and again, we're not going to have a chance to go through all of them, but I want you to notice one difference in this, one big, huge difference in this writing process. And it's these first 4 steps, okay? In the first 4 steps, students are not writing. Students are reading and mapping it out, reading and mapping it out, and doing that gradual release where we're doing it together, in groups, in pairs, individually. They're doing what I just showed you right now. Why is that important, especially for our struggling readers, writers, English learners, second language learners? That is important because a lot of times when it comes to writing, this is what happens. Let me model for you how to write. And I come up here and I start writing, I start modeling it. And then I say to the students, now you do it. So I just showed you how to do an expository compare and contrast. Now you do it. For me, that is like in cooking, okay? So I love to cook and I'm always looking for recipes. But if it doesn't have a picture of what the dish should look like, I won't do it. I need to know what the final product is going to look like in order for me to do that recipe. What we're always asking kids in writing is to create something that they have no clue what it really should look like, sound like, or what the thinking should be like. What we do in Path to Proficiency is the first 4 steps, we look at good examples of that type of writing. So if students are doing persuasive writing, we read good examples, we map it out so they understand the structure, which map are we going to use, and we do that with several examples for them to understand, first of all, what does it sound like? What does it look like? What's the structure of it on the map? And once they know that, then we say, now we're ready to write. So now I model step by step how to write that structure. And then finally they do theirs. So notice it's only 2 steps. This is the critical piece, because once they know what it sounds like, what it looks like, how it's put together structurally, then they can do it. Okay, I hope that makes sense. But we spend a lot of time here just looking at good pieces of writing, okay, making sure that they understand it. Okay, so let's say, for example, we have this writing prompt. Okay, think about all the things you have learned about during your life. Write about something you have learned and explain why it is important. Again, we go back to those signal words. Why always tells me that is going to be multi-flow, okay? So I am going to switch you over and we're going to look at this and draw the maps for this, okay? So if we were doing this task, and let me just double check we're on the right screen. Yes, we are, okay? If students had this prompt, okay, and they had to create this, okay? So first of all, it's like, I've got to think about what are all the things I have learned in my life, okay? You know what? I might start with a circle map and say, what are some things that I have learned, okay? So what are some things, oops, not working. And I could brainstorm all the things because I know that this map is for brainstorming. Okay, the circle map is for brainstorming. So I will brainstorm everything and put it in my circle map. And then I can decide, oh, I know which one I want to write about. Okay, I want to write about this one. So because I see the word why, that tells me it's going to be a multi-flow. So now I'm going to go to my multi-flow and I am going to write about the importance, let me change it. It was important for me to learn to ride a bike. Okay, that's what I want to write about. So now I gotta think, okay, what are all the reasons why it was important for me to learn how to ride a bike? Okay, so I'm gonna start adding all my reasons. One of the reasons was because, and this is really true, I was old. I was like in my late 40s when I learned how to ride a bike. But my daughters wanted to ride bikes, so that was one of the reasons. Another reason was we were doing a bike tour in Yosemite, and I'm like, oh, I have to learn how to ride a bike, okay? So I started adding all my reasons why. But then I come back and say, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 reasons why. I might just choose 2 to write more about, okay? So I might choose one of these 2 to write more about. But here's how I'm thinking. If I start with the correct type of thinking, I will get the correct type of writing. Most of the time, this is what students start off with, this type of map. And I'm sure you all have seen it, which is like a flow map, okay? They start with that type of map. And they do all this brainstorming, but it's not in the correct type of thinking. Okay, it's not in the correct type of thinking because this prompt said why. It has to be cause and effect. And so then when I do my writing off of this, then I go back to using those signal words. One of the reasons it was important for me to learn how to ride a bike was because da 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 and so on. Okay, so if we look at another prompt, and we come back and look at this prompt, the next prompt says, explain how you would handle being bullied and the steps you would take to stop a bully. Okay, again, what are those keywords? How, steps. What map does that lead me to? That leads me to the flow map because that is sequencing, okay? So again, I can go back then and say, now I'm gonna do a flow map for the sequencing. And this is available, students can do this in English and in Spanish as well. And use this. And so now I know that I have to do steps. But see the importance of those signal words throughout your listening, speaking, reading, and writing, okay? And you want, in order for students to be able to do this is getting that and having that gradual release to be able to do that. So students need to receive explicit instruction in text structures because first of all, that's the way it's reflective of your thinking. You know, we said reading and writing are all about thinking. Okay, and it really focuses on the language of that type of thinking. So if students receive explicit instruction on text structures, first of all, their writing is going to be clearer. Their reading comprehension is going to be higher. Okay, then eventually they'll move from one text structure, which I just showed you, into multiple text structures within writing, which is what good authors do, is use multiple text structures. They can use their signal words to assist them in comprehension, in note-taking, in speaking, and writing, okay? We can address all 4 domains of language. And the ability to write well and speak and understand is really important for student success, okay? So one thing we've got to remember is that reading and writing depend on language. So if you know this, then you will become a teacher of language, not just a teacher of reading and writing. What we're focusing on here is the language that is being used, okay?
And with that, excuse me, Hortencia, you have 4 minutes left.
Okay.
And I thought that maybe we could close with telling them a little bit about further training and what it consists of and how to get hold of this, because I have some questions in the chat
Okay.
asking for that information. This is chock full of information for all of us. And I know that you're just on the tip of the iceberg. So have them, please give information about how to take this further.
Absolutely.